Hi, this is an introduction to software testing using generative AI. It's a hot topic these days. My name is Jason Urban, and it's a little bit casual. It's not like a class or something like that, but I just want to walk people through some stuff I've shared at some conferences recently. And again, this is my opinion, my perspective, and experience. But I think there's just a lot of talk and a lot of marketing, and not a lot of action. So I want to share some thoughts and experiences I've had in this space. So people can get started and practically apply generative AI to actual software, real world software testing problems. So a quick note is I'm not naive. I've been around the block. So when I say, oh, it's useful for this or it's not useful for that, just realize I've been like in a lot of different roles at companies, some of the very largest companies and testing there down to some of the smallest, even startup companies and mid-sized companies, and also testing vendors. And I've paid for testing vendors. So I've kind of 360 seen the landscape of testing. And I've been thinking a lot about how to apply Gen AI from all these different perspectives so that it's useful and valuable. I sent a survey out. Actually, that's interesting. It says it was only 1 day ago. So I really did want to see anybody cared. And I appreciate the people that voted for this. So I'm putting together this workshop thanks to people that actually said that they would watch it. If not, I would just go along my day. So I want to start with this and say that it's almost comical how long recently people, they've always said it that software can't test, only humans can test because only humans can think, only humans are creative, only humans are empathetic with the end user. And it's funny because these are software testers and they should be testing it. They shouldn't make that statement before they even play with it or look at the newest technology. They just make these claims. But we will remove that mystery and probably disprove that here. So I want to talk about, not a tool. There's too much marketing out there as there is, but like a tool agnostic, meaning like for the most part, just not talk about any specific tool and only point to things that are generally useful and applicable. And I mean, of course, we'll use some LLMs and AI chatbots, some Gen AI, but most of these techniques are just transferable to any of them and across any of them. And even I've also focused on things that are free. So we live in a wonderful world where a lot of this AI stuff is now freely available. I'll talk about the core principles. So we'll get into some of that a little bit later where we'll talk about what works and what doesn't, but how to think about adding Gen AI and where it should fit into software testing. And then we'll also talk about the problems, like the reality. This isn't a Pollyanna story of, Gen AI will solve all testing problems or will increase the software developer lifecycle speed by 32.5%, or some other stuff like that. We'll be very practical and talk about the limitations and problems with applying AI too. So here's a top level list of topics I would like to cover. Talk about manual testing. And by the way, this is not a place for debate and naming. If you know what I mean when I say these things. If you have issues discussing the terminology, that's what LinkedIn's for, I guess, apparently. But talk about manual testing, how to use Gen AI to enhance manual testing. Also, just generation of test cases. Talk about hallucination. This is something that scares a lot of testers off from using and applying generative AI to software testing because they're worried it's going to make something up or it's not predictable enough. We'll also talk about how to use it in automation, which, a lot of people assume, but, it actually can help a lot of non-automated tasks. And we'll also talk about the emerging world of where a lot of testing is done by AI. A lot of testing of AI systems is done by AI. And we'll follow that with some notes on autonomous testing where, leading up to this, we're assuming all these other things where there's a human in the loop. A human starts the testing process. A human initiates it and a human reviews it. But what happens when the AI just starts testing on its own? So in a video format, I can't really make you or guilt you into doing the right thing. But this exercise will be, this whole little workshop thing will be 5 times more valuable if you just take 10 minutes, maybe 8 minutes, maybe 7 minutes, but I wouldn't take less than seven. Um, but go to google.com or your website, your company's website, or a website you want to play with. Um, just load that web page up and think about, see if there's any bugs. Just think about it for a few minutes with no distractions. Are there any bugs on the page? Are there any issues? Meaning, like, is it, maybe it doesn't want to bug? Maybe it's a design issue. Maybe it's something's missing. Think about the user flows. So what would the user expect to be able to do and want to do on this page? And who are those users? I added a little at this tiny URL here. There's a little worksheet if you like those kind of things, where you can just jot down your notes as you go through some of these little exercises. But again, take 10 minutes, and I should play some ASMR or something, but take 10 minutes and really look at that website of your choice. But think about these things. Are there any problems, any issues? What do users want to do with this page? Yeah, so you should be doing that now. And I'll let you pause, and we won't burn a bunch of bits just streaming static. So I'll say a few things while you should be looking at your website. But one issue thing here is and you see what's coming. We're setting it up, but I want you to have a context on what you and your own human brain see on web pages, and we'll also see how efficient you are. So try to do a good job. Try to think thoroughly, and we'll use that data in a second. Here's a screenshot of the little worksheet, and there's lines that just write down some notes of what you thought about it. So by default, I've used google.com here as an example, but you can use your website. Any website's great, which is what's awesome because it's pretty universal. Generative AI is a very useful and general purpose technology for software testing. So think about this, and just some ASMR while you're looking at your website, or if you're in the car or you're really lazy, but when you look at google.com, there's a bunch of, there's a search box, obviously. There's the logo in the middle. There's the I'm feeling lucky button. What does that do? On the bottom right, there's settings and privacy and terms of service. There's links to Gmail and images. The page layout is bright, by the way. It's very white and stark and simple. And people universally know how to use a search box these days. And there's also some mic input and photo kind of based search. What kind of thing about the user flows? I don't see any bugs, although it does look super Spartan. This is like, I always also use this page for testing AI because it's universally known, but it's also successful. Arguably, it works. People use it, and people find utility in it, and they make a little bit of money. So something's going right. It's kind of like a canonical, clean test example. But really finish out the whole, 6 to 8 minutes. All right. So assuming you spent some time, and again, if you haven't, I think most of you are cheating. Look at your webpage a few more minutes, and then come back. All right, so you're back with us. So you looked at your website, thought through kind of user flows, think if there's any issues, design issues, bugs, anything like that. So, so we're gonna take a step, and we're gonna come back to that in a second. So now you've written all that down. We're gonna use AI to test it, right? We're gonna dive right in and use some generative AI. So a quick note, a lot of testers especially are concerned and should be and conscious of privacy issues. So like you're worried about uploading any data, sensitive data, internal websites, pre-release software, or even your thoughts um, up in the cloud and have it indexed by some company, right? So to be clear, I won't argue any of that stuff. Just don't trust these cloud services unless you, like if you're using, like you probably feel comfortable if you're using google.com to continue the workshop without a lot of privacy concerns and just interact with it because it's a public website. But if you're concerned or you want to use your local stuff, download Olama. It's called Olama. It's the easiest way to run local. So you can run, so if you download Olama, it can take a few seconds, just pause it, but download that Olama and install one of the recent LLM models, either Llama or the Llama models or Phi or something like that. But download them, and then you can run them local. And you can, if you really want to be sure, you can unplug your network cable or turn off Wi-Fi, and your data is not being pushed off anywhere into the cloud. So you can run locally. There's also, if you have access to Azure private clouds, you can run, and some people in enterprises have access to LLMs that are sanctioned by their IT departments that run in private clouds, either locally behind the firewall or through Azure or something like that. In ChatGPT, you can opt out of them using your data for training, but frankly, if it's serious or concerning at all or risky, just don't do it. So take some time, get Olama up and running. There's other videos too if you need a little bit more help with that. But it should be you just download the thing, command line to install a model, and then you can get a chat window. It looks just like ChatGPT. And you can also get access to a locally running API. So if you want to use one of the cloud providers, just open up one of these. You have to sign up for them, I think. Almost all of them you have to sign in, but they're free, which is good news these days. So there's ChatGPT, there's Claude, Claude.ai, and several other ones that you can use. By default, just go to ChatGPT. That's the kind of universal standard today. Although I've lately been using Claude a little bit more frequently for whatever reasons. But open one of those up. So pause and open one of those up. If you don't have an account already, sign up. If you're using a free one without being signed in, like come on, if then you're not serious about Gen AI, and just exit the video right now. Exit the workshop right now. But yeah, come back when you've got one of those set up. So let's do this. So now that you've got one access to an LLM, these are very simple things, right? On the surface, there's a window, it's a chat window, chat box, and you can add photos just like you're texting somebody or whatever. So upload the picture. So pick the image. So click the little paper clip here, and upload a screenshot of whatever website you were testing, just like you were looking at it. Take a screenshot because you got to give access to the LLM so it can peek a website, and then ask it if there's any design issues or bugs or problems, some kind of question along that order. It doesn't super matter exactly what you ask it at this point. And when you've done that, you'll see things like this, right? It'll say something. It'll say, "Hey, for the screenshot," and Google's like a pristine, decently tested website, but it says there's no big issues or apparent design issues. But what's interesting with that, real quick, let's walk through this a little bit, is that it's looked at it and it's responded in like seconds, right? Faster than you and I could have analyzed that page to know that there weren't any major issues, which is interesting. It also notices it's a minimalistic design, and kind of lists the things that are on the page. I forgot to mention the footer explicitly. But it's done some basic checks. It even knows that the Google logos and, clear, looks good, and it's not fuzzy, and it's right in the middle. And so, but in a second, faster than us humans, it looked and figured out what's on the page, which is interesting. Um, and then it's listed some, I haven't gone through these even, doesn't really matter, the details, but it's gone through and it's found some maybe possible issues. So spacing adjustments. So what's interesting is that screenshot I showed you, there's a lot of white space, not just a lot of white space, but like a lot of white space. Like things are very spread out and very thinly dispersed, right? There's also, maybe there's some issues with contrast ratios. I believe if we dig into it, it doesn't like some LMs don't like the little advertisement bar at the bottom because it's got black text on gray. It's a little hard to read for some people. You may not have noticed that. Um, and it suggests some other types of testing that should be done or you could do. So what's interesting is, with no training, no tools, no programming, you just take a screenshot. People don't realize this today. This should be the big win. It should be worth watching the whole video, taking your time. Just take a screenshot of whatever you're testing, upload it to the AI, to Gen AI, and it can tell you that, hey, this looks pretty good. There's maybe, and to even tell you there's maybe some possible issues. And like these, we just saw things we didn't notice necessarily, right? Right away. Now you can go and ask further. You can say, well, classic joke is to say more and more and more, but you can say, tell me more issues, like more possible issues, more tests that I should run. Um, uh, other things I should look for, and just ask it. Like for in this case, in this response, say, what do you mean? Tell me more about number one, the spacing adjustments. Just type that in and say, why do you think those are issues, or what should I look for on a mobile device? It'll tell you hints on what to look for, not just the issues that it finds, but it can tell you, suggestions on what to test, which is pretty cool. So we've repeated the exercise you've done with your own eyes and your own human brain. Now think about it, and you could also, like, by the way, share the console log, even snippets of HTML up there too with a screenshot. But we'll keep it simple for now. By the way, when it has issues, you can also just say, hey, can you export that to Jira? But think now, so take another couple minutes. And this is super valuable. This will really cement in your mind how Gen AI can be useful for software testing at a very basic level, which is, what issues did it find that you didn't notice, right? And do the same thing, like in school, compare and contrast. What issues did you find that the AI didn't find, right? And if you look at that Venn diagram, that overlap, I think you both did and did independently. I did this workshop. Maybe you're just an amazing software tester and better than me, but I did this exercise with a bunch of other folks at a workshop, just last week actually, and there were about 50 people in the room, and they're all, by the way, software testers that are passionate enough and care about to come to a conference and care and show up to a workshop. And what we found? The AI discovered more issues than all the humans, and there were no issues that the humans found that the AI didn't discover, collectively and individually. That's pretty crazy. And even then, you're probably going, okay, yeah, great, that's interesting. This is pretty momentous. The machines, for the first time, I never guessed this would actually even happen. I always you dream that the AI can just do the testing, but the software can do testing. But the machines have found more issues than the humans, and more than you did. So realize the AI found more issues, very, very likely more than you did. And what's also interesting is it probably typed it up faster and better. So it probably took seconds instead of minutes. So an order of magnitude faster, right? And guess how much it cost? Like your 10 minutes of brain power as a tester, what does that cost in terms of just dollars? But what we did with generative AI was also free. So this is a very fundamental thing. So even if it was just as good as you and found just as many issues as you, it's probably 10 times faster and almost infinitely less expensive than our human brain testing time and effort. So that's just, I would say we should take a 15-minute break, go out into the woods and just absorb this thought. But that's pretty radical. It should be pretty disruptive to thinking about not just is it useful, but how useful can this stuff be? Yeah, and here an example is you can just ask it, like if it generates some issues, just say uh, generate a CSV file for Jira, right? It might kick off Python, in this case it did, or it just gives you the file that you can just import into Jira. So you can integrate this into your workflow, or whatever your bug reporting, you know, test case format is. So it's also worth noting, I kind of shared that this is happening like about a year ago, and no one really cared, to be frank. Um, and so I built a little Chrome extension. And so the idea was like, how do you make that process we just did even easier, like embarrassingly easy, right? And so I made a thing where you can just go to any web page and you click a button and it automatically shows all the test cases. It generates a bunch of different types of test cases, edge, take cases, like normal, basic, positive, happy path flows. And you could also create a custom bot, looked for specific things you cared about. Um, and guess what? That's how I spend my holidays, by the way, is building something like that. And I started out, and interestingly, no one cared. So I think what's interesting to note, too, very interesting about the generative AI and software testing is that, frankly, a lot of testers don't want to know that the AI can do this. Um, like emotional, there's emotional psychological issues going on. You'd think, software testers are working in software and technology, and they would be, you know, uh, want to use technology to make their job more efficient and better, but they don't. I think it's partly because they're self-selecting, right? Testers are generally lean back, passive, late adopter. Like I've never met a software tester that was running the iOS beta. Like I just haven't. For some reason, about the only one I think that does that. Um, but they're worried about software. They're cautious and they're skeptical. And I think this psychology is a real barrier to adoption in the software testing world. And we'll get to that more later. Yeah, here's an example of some of the test cases that create the basic ones. And you could, and the list just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Like it's almost like you just go back to and all it's doing is basically what we just did, right? Takes a screenshot of the app and then asks it like to generate test cases, all different types. And it does. It even tells you like, and you just want to look here, uh, what text or on the page made it, or HTML part of the page element initiated or motivated that test case. Um, and also, which is cool, AI can do all sorts of fun stuff. It can also tell you, why that's an important thing to test. And also, if it fails, if that test case for that thing fails, what's the argument that the tester should use when fouling the bug to try to get it fixed in triage? AI is pretty darn clever and pretty smart. Um, and a lot of those are better. That's better than me. I'll be polite. It's better tester than me, and again faster and far less expensive. So it's interesting to note more on the psychology point, is that I shared this little extension with some prominent testers. I won't mention the community, but a couple of them asked to play with it, and I sent them a build, and they installed it. I didn't hear from them for like 3 days, and then what I hear back, so then I ping them on email. I'm like, hey, not, yeah. Um, I ping her. I say, hey, what's going on? What do you think? Like, what's your feedback? Is it useful? And I don't know ego in it. I'm just curious what they think. Or did you try it at all? And it turns out they tried it, but they tried it for like only a few minutes. 10 minutes is generous. They just installed it. It worked. They said it worked and it generated test cases. And I go, and they're like, yeah, but it just wasn't interesting. And I'm like, okay, well, I made sure to generate test cases. And I said, were they interesting test cases? And they said, yes. Uh, and I said, were they tests that you wouldn't have come up with yourself? And they said, yes. And I'm like, okay. And I said, and they'd be useful in like a business or test coverage, like they're worth running, they're worthy, right? And they said, yeah, some of them were really good. But guess what? They still said, yeah, but I just don't, it's not interesting. I don't find it that useful. Like there's some weird stuff going on. And I think it's worth noting, that, and if you're watching this video, you're probably not one of them, but there's a lot of folks that don't want the stuff to work before testing it. And these are testers. This is somebody that this is a tool that might help, not just help them, but might change the way their field works and operates. And they won't test it. They only spend a few minutes and they get out. You'd think that a tester would, before they decide it's useful or not useful, would like try it on multiple websites, like maybe score and measure the quality and the percentage of overlap between what they would have done, what the AI did, and how useful they are. None of it. Not a single person did that level of analysis. They don't want to. So this is my concern. This is why I'm trying to help make content like this, so people can help themselves. But you can only do so much. So next segment will be on test generation at scale.